It's Friday, September 27th, and this is the Daily Medical News, where we bring you today's top clinical medicine headlines, as well as an in-depth look at the day's biggest story. I'm Nick Andrews.
And I'm Mary Ellen Schneider. Today, older Black women on Medicare have worse outcomes after a fragility fracture.
How sex hormones may affect women's risk of having asthma.
The FDA okays the first live vaccine for smallpox and monkeypox.
And the prevalence of developmental disabilities is up significantly over the last decade.
Plus, new evidence may bring new hope to patients with ulcerative colitis who can't take TNF inhibitor biologics.
After a major fragility fracture event, older Black women with postmenopausal osteoporosis had significantly higher mortality rates than their white counterparts. They were also more likely to be placed in a long-term nursing facility and to become newly eligible for Medicaid. University of Alabama Birmingham researchers presented those findings at the annual meeting of the American Society for Bone and Mineral Research. The investigators analyzed Medicare data for more than 400,000 white women and more than 11,000 Black women with postmenopausal osteoporosis and a fragility fracture. They looked at three outcome measures: mortality, debility, and destitution. Black women had a significantly higher mortality rate after a fracture than white women. That's 19% versus 15%. They also had a significantly higher composite outcome of all three outcome measurements, though the rates of debility and destitution were similar between the groups.
Elevated levels of circulating sex hormones were linked with lower odds of asthma in women. It's a finding that may explain, in part, asthma's different prevalence in women and men. The results come from a population-based study of nearly 4,000 men and 3,600 women, conducted by researchers at the Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh. They analyzed the associations in adults between free testosterone and estradiol levels and current asthma. They also looked at the impact of obesity. When the researchers didn't control for estradiol, women with testosterone levels in the second and fourth quartiles were significantly less likely to have current asthma than those with testosterone levels in the lowest quartile. Men with testosterone levels in the higher quartiles also saw a risk advantage. Not adjusting for testosterone, women whose estradiol levels were in the third quartile were at significantly lower risk of having current asthma than those in the lowest quartile. The findings were similar for men. In obese women, the findings were also similar. Higher levels of testosterone, or estradiol, were linked to a lower risk of current asthma, but obese men saw no advantage to higher levels of either sex hormone.
The FDA has approved Jynneos, a live non-replicating vaccine based on the vaccinia virus for smallpox and monkeypox. It's the first FDA-approved vaccine for the prevention of monkeypox disease. The approval for smallpox is based on results from a clinical trial that compared Jynneos with a previously FDA-approved smallpox vaccine in about 400 healthy adults. Adults who received Jynneos had a non-inferior immune response to those who received the older vaccine. The new vaccine's effectiveness against monkeypox was inferred from the participants' antibody response in the smallpox clinical trial. Routine smallpox vaccination in the U.S. stopped in 1972. Jynneos will be part of the Strategic National Stockpile, the nation's largest supply of potentially life-saving pharmaceuticals and medical supplies for use in a public health emergency. We'll be right back with more of today's top medical news after this message.
There was a significant increase in developmental disability prevalence in U.S. children from 2009 to 2017, and it may have been driven by factors such as better identification and availability of services. The prevalence of any developmental disability rose from 16% in 2009 to 18% in 2017 in children aged 3 to 17 years. That's an increase of 9.5%. Researchers at the National Center for Health Statistics examined data from more than 88,000 children. They found that most of the increase came from ADHD, up 13%, autism spectrum disorder, up 122%, and intellectual disability, up 26%. What's behind the increases? Investigators say improved identification related to increasing parental awareness and changing provider practices may account for much of the rise. The findings appear in the journal Pediatrics.
Clinical evidence is beginning to emerge that supports using alternative biologic treatments when patients with ulcerative colitis aren't able to take anti-TNF therapies. 2 new studies may point the way. In the first, researchers from Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai in New York evaluated interleukin-12 and 23 antagonist ustekinumab as an 8-week induction therapy and a 44-week maintenance therapy. More than 1,200 patients with moderate to severe ulcerative colitis were randomized to ustekinumab or to placebo. At week 8, more than 15% of ustekinumab users achieved clinical remission compared with 5% of placebo patients. And the percentages of patients who met major secondary endpoints or had mucosal healing were significantly higher in the treatment group. At week 44, roughly 40% of ustekinumab patients achieved clinical remission compared with 24% of those in the placebo group. In the second study, the Icahn School of Medicine Mount Sinai researchers compared vedolizumab with the TNF inhibitor adalimumab in nearly 800 adults with moderate to severe ulcerative colitis. At 52 weeks, 31% of the vedolizumab patients achieved clinical remission compared with 22% of those on adalimumab. Treatment effects were more pronounced in the vedolizumab patients who hadn't used a TNF inhibitor before. Dr. Richard Farrell is with the Connolly Hospital and Royal College of Surgeons in Dublin, Ireland. In an editorial on the 2 studies, he notes that long-term rates of colectomy for ulcerative colitis have not declined over a 10-year period. That fact highlights the need for new biologic therapies and strategies. But Dr. Farrell cautions that cost can't be ignored when weighing a patient's therapeutic options. For example, any clinical superiority of vedolizumab should be balanced against the significant cost advantages of subcutaneous regimen of adalimumab. Both of these studies appear in the New England Journal of Medicine. And that's it for today's Daily Medical News. Remember to look for the latest episodes of our sister podcasts, the CardioCast and the Post Call Podcast. New episodes of the CardioCast and Post Call drop on Fridays. For MD Edge, I'm Nick Andrews.
This week, our stories were contributed by Sarah Freeman, Steve Semino, Bianca Nogrady, Jim Kling, Randy Dotinga, Will Pass, Andrew Bowser, Alex Otto, Gregory Schwachtman, Eric Greb, Christopher Palmer, Richard Franke, Jeff Craven, Heidi Spleet, Mitchell Zoller, Michelle Sullivan, Doug Brunk, and Lucas Franke. Our editors include Terry Rudd, Kathy Scarbeck, Denise Fulton, Renee Matthews, Laura McGlade, Jeff Evans, Catherine Nellist, Therese Borden, Catherine Hackett, Elizabeth Mechkati, and Mark Lesney. Our editor-in-chief is Mary Jo Dales. And I'm Mary Ellen Schneider. If you like what you hear on the Daily Medical News, please leave us a review or rating on Apple Podcasts and check out the full stories available via the links in the podcast notes. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here next week.